Welcome back to the Discovering Commercial Real Estate podcast. We have top producing investment sales broker and vice chairman at Ripco Real Estate, Stephen Preuss, here with us today. Stephen, it's a pleasure having you on. Thank you for
Thank you,
again for doing
John.
this.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Before we talk business, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. So, where are you from, and why did you get into this industry?
Sure. I grew up in Long Island mainly with a stint in Queens, and I live in Long Island now as well with my wife and two children, boys, 6 and 9. Um, why I got in the industry, I started off in college coming straight out and going to Wall Street. Wanted to conquer the world. Started working for a big firm there. Within 2 years, I did pretty well, but I always had really an entrepreneurship that I needed to fill. So I took the capital, and I started with none. And in those 2 years, I was able to put a few bucks away. And after that, I left and I started opening up businesses.
Awesome.
I opened up several different businesses. I actually packaged them up and sold them while I was 24. And at that point in time, I was really looking for my new adventure. I looked back over what I really enjoyed the most over that first stint of my career, and it was the real estate portion. It
Mm.
was negotiating the leases, even though I'm not a leasing broker, but just being involved in the commercial real estate world. So once I sold my businesses, I wanted to go into commercial real estate. CoStar had a top 10 list of the top 10 companies. And I actually met with all top 10. And there was one that stood out at the time that I ended up joining in 2005, which is Massey Knackle.
Got it. Understood. And why did you decide to kind of choose Queens as your primary market? Is it because of the knowledge, the fact that you grew up there?
No, it was actually, I saw a need that needed to be
Mm.
filled.
Opportunity.
Massey Knackle was the first to expand out into the borough. Obviously back then being an out of boroughs broker was not as sexy
Not
as
ideal.
as
Yeah.
Manhattan or even Brooklyn at that point in time. So I think there was a need there. I did have a knowledge of Queens, and I made a decision to really concentrate into Queens at that point in time.
Got it. Understood. And how did your experience at Massey Knackle kind of prepare you to be a chairman and a leader in your business today?
Sure. Well, there was a lot of great fundamentals that we learned there, and there's a lot of people in the industry that started their career with Massey
Massey
Knackle
Knackle.
all over the place. I know you've had a couple
Yeah.
podcast speakers on already from Massey. So they really force you to learn the business. They didn't even allow you to get on the phone for the first several months through
Mm.
you until you went through a cataloging period, and that allowed you to become an expert in a certain area, which is the territory system.
Right.
It's a great place to start off for young brokers. You're forced to learn an area, become an expert. And it's really important to, before you get on the phone, to have that general knowledge, right? So
Foundation.
once you get on the phones, there's no turning back. And if you don't know your neighborhoods, if you don't know the owners, if you don't know the zoning, if you don't know the market trends, it's going to show on the phone.
Mm. Definitely. And what do you think you'd be doing career wise if not commercial real estate? Do you think it'd be something in the entrepreneurial field?
Yeah, that's easy. I'd be an entrepreneur. That's the
Awesome.
way I started. That's how I look at my business on a day-to-day basis, which I think separates me from 99% of the other brokers.
Right.
But I'd be an entrepreneur in some field or fashion.
Got it. Understood. And Stephen, you mentioned that you have a couple interesting deals that you're working on right now. Talk us through these deals and how you're kind of able to stay busy in such times of uncertainty.
Yeah, we've had a good run over the last year in an uncertain market. We've closed about 650 million in the last 9
Awesome.
months. So very active, mostly development value add storylines. It's hard to sell, stabilized, price to perfection product if there's not a storyline or some value add to it right now where the interest rates are. And in my practice, I would say it's probably heavy development. But I sell really anything in the outer boroughs, any type of product, asset agnostic. In a field where a lot of people take a specialization in product,
Hmm.
I never did. I really took more of kind of a territory focus.
Got it.
So I've become known to handle a lot of the more complex, more difficult, more hairy deals in the outer boroughs, especially Queens. And we have a couple interesting ones that we just closed. We closed on a 3-acre site in Jamaica, 8901 165th Street, that I was working on for years. That was really a market mover in today's world, especially in a secondary market like
Mm.
Jamaica. We closed a few interesting ones very recently, including 2 days ago, we closed a $51 million transaction in Flushing. That is a covered land industrial play that we sold at a two cap. Yes, a two cap in today's world. But again, value add later on where the owner will probably rezone it. And then before he rezones it, he's going to use it. So a
Got it.
lot of those types of, structured, wavy type of processes. But those are the deals that are getting done today.
Got it. Understood. And this deal, the 8901 165th Street deal, so it's the first to be by a transit zone or in a transit area.
It's a 3-acre site, and it's in the transit hub of Jamaica, which, as far as our records show, it's one of the largest ones in Queens
In
and
Queens.
in actually in the outer boroughs for the last decade.
And how did this deal kind of come about? How did you put this together?
So it was kind of I guess, a typical transaction for
Okay.
me. I chased down the owner for
Okay.
for 10 years. I kept peppering him with or them with information. I've sold about 2.5 million square feet in development in Jamaica alone. So I had a lot to talk about.
Mm,
And then once the time came around, I was able to obtain the business.
got it.
There were some really intricate speed bumps with this transaction. It actually houses the MTA. It's their main transit hub for their buses.
Mm,
So we had the MTA and we had everything that we had to deal with them and their bureaucracy and red tape that we had to get sign offs on. So it was from start to finish. It was probably a 9-year process.
wow.
And it was a 4-year transactional span as far as when I got hired to the time we
Wow.
closed.
Wow. That's insane. And can you walk us through a deal that you were very confident in that didn't end up going as planned? And how do you mitigate risk in situations like this?
Sure. I guess you have to look at everything in a larger picture.
Mm,
You can't force transactions. There's a natural momentum to them.
mm,
Obviously, I can use my skill set and my experience to help, mitigate a lot of that risk. Try to answer a lot of the questions that I know that I'm going to come up with, or that the process is going to outlay. But I would say probably one that comes to mind recently is one that I just sold in Corona, Queens. It was a $50 million hotel and development site that I actually sold 4 times.
mm,
The last time that we sold, we had a couple issues that arose, both on the title, both on the seller. There was a foreclosure in the middle of it. So patience, not trying to push people,
mm.
just showing that you're the right choice to really navigate the transaction from start to finish. And you'd be surprised how little in the brokerage world that people take patience into consideration. It's not just all force, force, force.
Right.
Sometimes to get it over the finish line, there needs to be some things that happen and elongates or protracts the process to get to that finish line. So I think overall, I used a little bit of patience on that one, and it turned out being okay.
Understood. Got it. And Stephen, you mentioned in an interview with The Real Deal that Flushing is and always has been an active place for development, even with downturns and times of economic flux. What about Flushing makes it such an attractive and active market?
Yeah. So I've sold as of today about 4.5 million buildable square feet in Flushing alone. I've been involved in that market, for the past 20 years. We are entrenched in the community. Some of my partners are on the Flushing board there as well. So overall, it's got its own ecosystem. I have touched most of the outer boroughs, especially Queens, and Flushing has been the only market in good, bad times, good or bad times or indifferent, that has had an upward trajectory during any downturn.
Mm,
It almost has its own bubble around it where most of the land there continues to get elevated. A lot of the people that are there, they want to keep their money there. It's if you live there, you really don't leave there, right? So you have the younger community with some of these live work plays that these developments that are in play right now. The older community likes to stay there, and the ecosystem is just something that is completely different than anything else in the New York City
mm,
landscape. The only real downturn or pullback I saw was with COVID, but that was momentary. It's always been the most expensive land, the most expensive rents in all of the outer boroughs.
Wow.
Even more than Williamsburg, Long Island City, you name it. It's maintained $300, $400 a buildable. Some of the rents there on Main Street and Roosevelt are in excess of $300 a foot.
Wow.
And the overall occupancy and vacancy is very, very strong, and it continues to prop itself up. So it's amazing to see year after year, the escalation of that community.
That's awesome. That's great. And you said in another interview with Pincus Co Media that with the expiration of the 421A, residential developers are kind of stepping back. How do you predict this pull between developers and government kind of playing out in the next decade? Do you think policymakers will ever kind of shift their stance?
I It doesn't look like it right now.
Okay.
So back in 2017, when the 421A lapsed last time around, I believe we had a lot more sensible people in a position to make decisions, whether it's in Albany or politics. And it took a year and a half for 421A to get re-rolled
Right.
out. At this point in time, I think we're going to have to go through some real pain and suffering before we get people to look through the lens of the greater good.
Mm,
Um, at this point in time, it's terrible. Development is a big piece of my business. That is getting taken away. You're still seeing some sites trade, but it's all condo development.
mhm.
But talking about the outer boroughs, condo development can only make sense in a handful of areas, right? It's mostly rental, it's mostly workforce. So new stock, unfortunately, will not be built for the foreseeable future. That has given way to some other opportunities like alternative uses, community facilities, users
Mm.
stepping up. But we need housing. And I think, unfortunately, from my take and talking to a lot of people that are a lot more connected than I am, it doesn't look like it's going to be anytime in the foreseeable future.
Understood. Got it. And what alternative uses have you seen that are kind of interesting for to residential?
Sure. I've had a lot of exposure to charter schools.
Mm,
I've sold land to a few of the very prevalent charter school developers in the outer boroughs,
mm,
religious facilities. We have senior care users. We have different type of workforce communities. We have different type of programmatic tenancies, whether it's, city or state based, which I would say probably about 40% of the product that I've sold, at least over the last several months, has been an alternative type of use
mm.
outside of just,
Residential.
plain residential.
Got it. Understood. And can you give us a little perspective on ground leases? In what cases would an owner want to ground lease their site versus sell it versus JV? How should a broker kind of navigate this?
Right, and these are the alternative and a little bit more complex, I guess, outside of a typical disposition that we pride ourselves as far as being able to execute at a high level, and you don't see a lot of it in the outer boroughs
Right.
for the most part. But overall, we've seen more of that in the last 2 years than I've seen in the last 20 years, and there's a number of reasons for that. Pricing has changed,
Mm,
right? So for an owner who has gotten X amount, knocked on their door for the last few years, up until the last couple of years, it's hard for them to realize that their property is now 30 or 40 or 50% less
that's
than
yeah.
what it was at the height in 2017. So it could be as easy as value, where they want to be able to realize some of that value add, and the only way to do that is to stay in the deal
Mm,
and do a joint venture or a ground lease at that point in time. Obviously, taxes, right? We're taxed very heavily here in New York, so that may be a big issue if they have no basis. Maybe there's a partnership dispute or a title issue, whatever the case may be, where they're not, they're not able to dispose of the property. So these are all different ways that an owner can execute some sort of development on their land without having to sell it, or riding out the appreciation of a development with a joint venture partner who can bring a lot of value to the table as far as construction loan guarantees and being able to get the land built.
got it. Understood. And you mentioned this concept that you're able to kind of set yourself apart as a broker by kind of doing the things that nobody else wants to do. So, what are these? Give us some examples of things where you had to kind of think creatively and think outside of the box to get the deal done.
A lot of it comes down just to my tolerance of aggravation.
Okay.
uh, I'm able to, handle a lot of deals at once. I'm able to maneuver through it. I think it's just kind of the way that I'm built and the way I've always ran my business. Um, and I think what really it comes down to separating myself from a lot of brokers is that I put my business hat on first.
Mm,
I don't look at things initially as a broker, as a salesman, even though salesmanship is essential to the whole process. But I put myself in the position of the owner.
mm,
I put myself in the position of how I would go about bringing the most value to the property, and I think that comes from just my entrepreneurship and just the way that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. So when I look at something, I don't look at it, just as in a black and white or X's and O's. I try to look at it afar from first and think about the best way to
mm.
structure it and how we can go about the process to structure the most value for that deal. So I think overall, putting your business hat on first before you put your broker hat on
Right.
first, and you'll easily set yourself apart from most of the brokerage world.
Understood. So do you think it's important to kind of put yourself in the other person's shoes to kind of understand where they're coming from in order to put the deal together?
Absolutely.
Got it.
Absolutely. There'll be more connection that way.
Mhm.
And that's why I've had a lot of clients that have been with me for 15,
Right.
20 years. And, in some circumstances, they'll only deal with me for their properties in Queens, because, it's not always yes, 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 sell, sell, sell. Sometimes it's, hey, it's not the right time to
Right.
sell, or you shouldn't sell this. You should look to, co-develop it, or you should lease it out first. So those things that a normal broker would say, hey, I want the fee now, I
Right.
want to sell it now. It's not always in the best interest of the client.
Understood. And what's your view on the investment sales market in general right now in New York City? And what advice would you give college students kind of about to enter this market?
Well, short, it's choppy.
Mm,
It's choppy, but it's a clear market. And what I mean by that is that there's some products that sell, and there's other products that were very hot or desirable a couple years ago that are almost impossible to sell right now.
mm,
I mentioned it before, but fully baked product, fully leased out, cap rate driven product. It's difficult to sell right now. I have products in some of the most desirable markets in the outer boroughs, and it's tough to get a 7 or 8 cap right now on fully stabilized product where I
mm.
could have sold that property for a 4.5 or 5 cap just 18 months ago. But there's story driven value add type of product that people like and still can raise money for. And really, it's small cap properties that are
Mm,
trading. So under 10 million is 96% of the market trades right now, which is spectacular
wow.
when talking about New York City, if you
Right.
think about it, right? So, and that's just a functionality of who's buying that product, um, which I know I'm diverting a little bit here, but I think it's important to
Right.
note. Generational buyers are the ones that are really propping up the market right now. These are people that have 13 or 14 properties in a certain market,
Mm,
and they're going to be there forever. They got a long horizon, whether it be 10 or 20 years, or just passing it down to their kids. And they're looking to just take that cash flow and put it to use and buy that 15th or 16th property in that
right.
neighborhood. And if it's a little bit more expensive than what they paid for the product 10 years ago, it's certainly less expensive than what they would have paid for it 2 or 3 years ago.
Mm,
They were priced out of the market from syndicators, institutional buyers, and things like that. So that's a really interesting dynamic right now. And even the larger players,
mm,
the ones that I've been selling product to for 30, 40, or $50 million, they're hedging the marketplace also and mitigating risk and buying 3 or 4 smaller products.
mm.
So if you have something that's under 10 million right now and it's priced somewhat correctly, you'd be surprised what you can get on a disposition basis. So that's really an interesting dynamic of the market. As far as a college kid coming into the market right now, um, I would say join a good team. I would say join a team that has, someone that's been in the market for a while, but also, and it's probably difficult to find, but also a team that offers you some upside, that you're not, regulated to a different floor with
Mm,
all of the juniors, right? The way that I run my business is that it's one larger silo. Everyone on my team, and I have a 13-person team, everyone is involved in every deal. Everyone gets a piece of everything, and everyone's exposed to everything. And I think that is very beneficial for somebody joining, because a lot of the other opportunities that, maybe someone I was looking to hire went for, a paid
Mm,
$120,000 analyst role with a fund. Well, those aren't around too much
right.
anymore. So I think for the most part, join a team, someone that gives you a little bit of upside, that you're exposed to all parts of the transactional process, and that you can grow with.
Got it. Understood. And how do you kind of train your new hires to work out how real a buyer or seller really is? Is there kind of a question that you like to ask to get a sense of who you're dealing with?
So it's experience more than anything
Okay.
else, right? So the newer junior brokers, they'll get excited,
Right.
which is great, but it's a vetting process, and it's really through experience. The way that I work is I work in the bullpen, and this was an old Massey
That's
Knuckle
enough. Okay.
thing. Even when I was at my previous company, I was one of the only vice chairs that continued to work outside of a glass office, and um, the juniors sit right next to us, right? So I have a few senior partners that have been with me for nearly a decade now, and they sit right next to me, and the juniors sit right next to them. So being in that atmosphere, which kind of goes back to joining the right team, and being able to hear everybody, you pick up things, right?
Right.
And if you're able to sit next to myself or one of my senior guys or girls for 2 weeks, that's like 2 months, and in some cases
Right.
2 years of training,
Right.
of corporate training. So being around people, listening, that is going to help, with the learning curve to figure out who's real and who's not.
Got it. Understood. Okay. And how do you remain top of mind with a potential buyer or seller without being pushy?
I guess following up in a professional manner, and not just looking for the sale, right?
Hmm.
We're in the information business. We're
Right.
not in the sales business, and I'm sure you've heard that
Yeah.
before. If you have information, people will come to you. And I think it's some of the deals that I've had, like the bus terminal in Jamaica that we were talking
Right.
about before. The only reason that I won that business is because I stayed on the seller and gave him relevant, real information without asking him for the
Anything. Yeah.
business. And if you do that, they'll come to their own realization, that you're the best fit for them. So I think pumping real, relevant information, having the knowledge that they can call you without you running a whole sales pitch on them every time that you
Right.
speak to them. That's how you stay relevant, and that's how you impact people, whether you're in front of them or not.
Got it. Understood. So do you think that investment sales brokers should kind of change the structure of their follow up with providing value instead of asking for value?
Well said.
Okay.
Exactly.
And how do you go about setting goals for yourself and for your team?
So, we're in expansion mode right now, and we want to bring the right people around us. We're building out kind of individual silos under a larger silo for some of my senior partners.
Hmm.
So it's expanding the team. Right now, we're in a fantastic position. So this is over the last year and a half to 2 years at Ripco now. I'm able to have a full open runway, which is the first time in my career, which I've had that, which is why I'm smiling right
Awesome.
now. So I'm able to take what I've done so successfully, in a portion of the outer boroughs, where we had 30, 35%, 40%
Right.
market share. We've had more market share in one borough than I bet anyone else had in any other borough.
Yeah.
And now we're able to do that through the tri-state. So our goal and how we're setting our goals is expansion of what we've done so well, and
Mm.
now we're going to do it throughout the tri-state arena, which we've been doing successfully now for the last year and a half. So that's a larger goal, and really for I guess for the team, it's just setting example. I'm not the best manager, but I am a good worker. I'm a good executor. I like to think I'm a good business person.
Right.
I'm a good person in general. So I think overall setting an example for your team, and they'll follow. And that's worked for me for the last 10 years as I built my team.
Got it. Understood. And what do you look for in a new hire, in a new person joining your team?
Someone who doesn't ask for Fridays off.
Okay.
It's amazing what the younger generation thinks is acceptable these days. But I guess that's a separate discussion
Right.
altogether. But someone who's hungry, someone who will do anything to succeed, someone who's smart, or at least doesn't make the same mistake twice.
Mhm.
Someone who's open to learning, and someone who's open to a longer horizon and putting in the work, but having it pay off on the back end, right? Because brokerage, it's even though if someone joins my team, they're a part of every deal. It's going to take them a
Long
year
term.
to 2 years to really make, I want to say, quality money, or money that's acceptable
Right.
in the greater New York City area. So patience, willing to put in the time now and have it pay off later on.
Got it. So do you think a new hire kind of has to have this concept of delayed gratification kind of nailed down where they understand that what they do today will pay off in 2 years?
Delayed gratification on the money aspect,
On
yes,
the money
but,
aspect.
on a day-to-day, they should be winning small
Right.
goals along the way, right?
Right.
Being able to learn an area, being able to, have a presentation on top of mind, being able to value properties, which is very important for our business, being a well-rounded broker, and for you to be a well-rounded broker, it takes time. You might be the best salespeople, but I've met a lot of really good salespeople that were terrible brokers,
Right.
and I think our business is about a 97% fail rate. So you really have to be able to put together a full package, and that takes time. And yes, that gratification, it takes time.
Right. Understood. And what do you think makes a good leader and a good principal?
Um, I know it sounds a little bit corny, but I think to be a good person,
Mm.
to put yourself in somebody else's
Right.
shoes, to be likable to an extent where, you're not there to be friends with them, but you want people to feel comfortable. And if people feel comfortable, they'll go further for you and for their team. And it really, again, just going back to by showing by example.
Mm.
If you're putting in the time, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, whatever 12 hours a day that is, that'll come through, especially if the senior people have been doing it for a while. I mean, I don't have to be, working 12
Right.
hours a day now, but it's ingrained in me. And if the younger folks see that, they'll see why you're so successful, that you're doing it after 10, 15, 20 years.
Understood. Got it. And let's say somebody wants to be a real estate entrepreneur. Would you recommend for them to work at a big shop like CBRE or JLL, or start their firm directly out of college and kind of learn as they go?
Good question. I'm probably cut of a different cloth. So, the larger houses, even though they have some good training at some of them, my vision was always, and I've seen both sides of the sword.
Mm.
For the first 17 years, between more of a boutique group like Massey Knackwell and then a larger publicly traded company. It's I think it's important to have a good company, a good base behind you, somebody with a good name that has traits in place that you can get exposed to right away. But I've always thought that you want more of an open runway. You want, people that are there to support you, not people that are looking to put you in a certain box
Right.
or put restrictions on you. For my business, I'm a middle markets guy, right? So I need things done quickly. I need listing agreements signed right away. I mean, just this morning, I had a pitch on Northern Boulevard on the back of a van.
Okay.
You have to be able to move quickly and nimbly,
Right.
for what I do, at least. If you're looking to sell glass towers in the city, for $1 billion, even though those aren't trading too much anymore, you're probably better off,
CBRE, JLL.
at a larger
Right.
firm. But if you're looking to do, something transactional, something middle markets, as long as you have some stable training,
Mm.
you don't necessarily need to be at a larger firm.
Okay. Understood. And what are some networking groups or community affiliations that you recommend young investment sales brokers to be a part of to kind of propel their career forward?
There's a lot of them out there, and between my team, I think that we're a part of, either myself or them. Probably part of 2 dozen
Mm.
different groups. It's really where you're going to focus in is probably where you'll want to network in,
Okay.
right? So when I started, Queen's Chamber was great for me. And I'm part of a couple of the bids, like the Flushing bid and Jamaica bid, since I was doing a lot in those areas. So you want to be strategic about it. You don't want to be out 5 nights a week, and pull time away
Right.
from,
Your actual
your
business.
money time,
Yeah.
right? You got to work at work. You can't just be out, mingling just for the sake of mingling. So you got to be strategic about it. I try to do it still now, 2 days a week. So I look at what really would be most impactful.
Mm.
I try not to go to anywhere where there's, 95% brokers, even though it's
Right.
nice to see everybody. I'd rather be one-on-one with a client at
Got it.
that point.
Understood. And what real estate asset classes or property types do you see potential for in the coming decade in New York City and beyond?
Sure. I mean, I still like land. I know it's land and development is a dirty word right
Right.
now, but I think that there are opportunities in the right areas, and we're going to continue to see them. The market is still continuing to reset. But if you can get land at 50 cents on the dollar on what it was trading for just 18 months ago,
Right.
in a quality area that has a longer term, horizon for value, I still like well placed land. I like retail as well,
Mm.
neighborhood retail, right? Not big box, and most of the outer boroughs is neighborhood
Yeah.
retail,
Yeah.
but retail that's essential for workforce housing. I think that's key. That's going to continue to play, and land.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you were to zoom out and kind of look at the trends in your skill sets and your interests, what's the overall theme that led you to this point today?
Competing.
Mm.
I love to compete. I love to see the leaderboard and my name on top. I love to win. Um, I also like to solve, right? I like to be continually pushed. Um, I guess that's why I like the complexities of some of these deals, and the hairier the deals, the
Mm.
better, because it continues to evolve your mind, how you make deals work and how you make deals happen. So continuing to be tested, I think that overall has been able to help me scale, continue to stay relevant, continue to sell more and more every
Mm.
year. Because if you can show people that you can continue to be productive and execute at a high level in times that are good, bad, and different, like right now,
Right.
you come out of that market a lot
On top.
stronger.
Yeah.
And I've seen that time and time again in these downturns.
Got it. And what has been the most difficult point in in your career, and how did that kind of shape you as an individual from that point on, and as a businessman?
Good question. So I think the 2008, 9, 10 debacle was probably the most difficult in
Mm.
my real estate career, because there was no money. There was no money out there for anyone to buy anything. The banks weren't lending, and it would just seem like a deserted barren. In 2009 and 10, 2008 was okay, at least in my viewpoint. But 2009 and 10, just nothing was trading.
Right.
So I made it a point in 2009, and I was only 4 years into my commercial real estate career, to not change anything,
Mm.
to not pull back, to not look for something different, not create the wheel. I
Stay
built
on
my
track.
business. Yeah, I built my business on the phones. So I continued to make 250 and 300 calls a week, and anyone that I worked with at that point in time will contest to
Right.
that. Um, and I continued doing the blocking and tackling. And then when I came out of that, I was far ahead of most of the other brokers in the office, or most of the other brokers in general.
Mhm.
Because I continuing to build my business, continuing to be relevant. I worked hard and did sell some properties where other brokers didn't sell anything.
Right.
I continued to expand my focus throughout Queens, not just a little portion of Queens that when I started. So I considered continue to evolve my business.
Mm.
So in 2011, when you started seeing some green shoots, and the sun was shining a bit again, my business immediately took to the next level,
Mm.
and I never looked back from there. So I think that we're going through something like that right now, even though it's certainly not apples to apples. There certainly is plenty of cash out there, or access to capital.
Right.
But now is a great time to go back to basics. So when the market does turn, and it could be a year, could be 18 months, could be 2 years from now, The people that keep their head down and continue to run their business model, they're going to come out ahead just like I did back in 2011.
Understood. So do you think that the reason you kind of came out ahead was that everybody else was kind of playing on defense and stepping back and sitting on the sidelines, and you kind of took the opposite strategy and you kind of attacked, and that's kind of what set you apart?
Part of it, you know, it was a scary time, so not a
Mm,
lot of people knew what to do,
right.
right? So, if someone doesn't know what to do, sometimes they do take a step back. It may not be defense, it just may not having a roadmap or a
Got it.
game plan.
Okay.
Other people look to reinvent the wheel, right? When something's not working, try to do something else or try a different territory or try a different approach. And that's not always the right answer. It's just sometimes you got to grind a little bit harder for a
Hmm,
little bit longer.
got it. And Stephen, you've closed over $7 billion in transactions. Who do you learn from at this point in your career?
I try to surround myself with people who are continuing to excel. I try to surround myself, excuse me, with people who are, um, deal makers or people who are excelling in different fields of real estate.
Mm,
So we've just brought in a debt team, a high performing debt team into Ripco. Really pinning that to my business a little bit more. The retail leasing aspect of it
mm,
now with the dominance that Ripco has, I'm starting to fold that into my business a little bit more. So, continuing to be as well rounded as possible without losing my main focus, which
got it.
is dispositions or getting sidetracked. But
Right.
adding more revenue streams by different service lines and putting the right people around you. It helps you get smarter. It helps you make more money. It helps you, really advocate for your client a little bit more when you're able to, give them those other service
Definitely.
lines with people that you trust and know that they can execute at a level like you can.
Awesome. Great. And what idea do you believe about the Queens commercial real estate market that many people you respect disagree with you on?
I think it's the most undervalued
Mm,
borough. Obviously, I'm biased, but I see it because I've lived it for the last 20 years.
right.
It's probably the most under retailed area, um, underdeveloped. It's a slower moving pace in Queens, and I say that in a balanced and good way.
Mm,
The Brooklyn market, especially over the last few years. I mean, you know, it's just the values there. It's just been so high paced. The values there are incredible. It's gotten so built up. It's been the sexiest area in New York City. You know, I think that overall, Queens still has a lot of wood to chop.
got it.
There's a lot of workforce housing there, which is great, stable income. Obviously not as great on the appreciation scale, but even through COVID, you really saw little to no change outside of some of the waterfront areas. But the heart, along the 7 train in Queens, the occupancy level didn't really move
Didn't drop.
much at all. So it's good, stable assets for the longer term. And I think some of these other secondary markets, again, outside of the waterfront,
Hmm.
they've gotten built up a bit and they're taking a breather now, but they still have a long ways to go. So it's a great place for a longer term stable investment. And it's going to continue to fill in for some of this newer construction, whether it be residential or retail.
Got it. Understood. And do you think the job of a commercial real estate broker can ever be automated?
Parts of it. I mean, the technology now, to what it was when I first started,
Right.
when I used to carry around a portfolio of handwritten, notes and tax maps and pictures
Right.
and information for some of the building owners to what it is now is night and day. But New York City is a breed of its own. There has to be
Mm,
connections. There has to be, a greater structure of mind of putting these deals
right.
together. So I think if CRE does get fully automated, New York City would be the last place to get automated.
Right. Definitely. um, and what are some things you had to sacrifice to close nearly $7 billion in deals and 700 completed transactions?
Time. I'm obsessed, with work.
Mm,
I'm OCD with responding and just getting things out that day. So, that's gotten take away a little bit from my personal life.
Mm,
Um, but I like to think I've balanced that out over the last several
mm,
years. I'm lucky enough to have a wonderful wife that's helped me along the way. I've been with my wife now for 20 years. We started a family several years ago. I got two kids that are 9 and 6.
great.
So that helps with balance if you do it the right way. If you got a good family life,
Right.
if you can leave the house in the morning and know that everything's taken care of and the family's good, you can if you're working 10, 12 hours, you can do 15 hours of
Mm,
work in a 10-hour day, which is, part of the reasons that I think I've been so successful is that I've always tried to master doing 15 hours of work in a 12-hour day. And when I started, it was probably 20 hours of work in a 15-hour day. But, um, I think a little bit of that was taken away as far as the personal life in the beginning. But, I've worked on being
mm.
a better person, being a better family man, being a better business person, being a better partner. And that's allowed me I guess, to normalize that a bit.
Got it.
Yeah.
Understood. And so you mentioned this concept where you're kind of able to do 15 hours of work in a 10-hour day. What are some strategies you employ to kind of go about this? Do you actively remove things that kind of don't benefit you with your goals?
Yeah, I work at work, and
Okay.
that's what I've been saying for a long time. I don't take lunch breaks
Right.
unless it's with clients. If I do, eat something, I'm eating at my desk.
Right.
I don't socialize too much around the office. Just being efficient. There's small things that you can do throughout your day to be more efficient,
Right.
right? And even though you're at your desk for 10 hours, I would say that, most of the people that I see, not in my office, of course, but outside of my office, if they're at their desk for ten hours a day, they're doing 5 or 6 hours
Right.
of work.
Yeah.
Which, if you want to be able to have that, well-rounded life and do things outside of work and be, the 1% of your industry, be efficient at work.
Mm,
Work at work. Cut out all the nonsense. Cut out all the cooler talk, and
right.
just be there, be present, send out emails. I mean, when I started, a good friend of mine, he always had a funny story that he continues to tell from the day. I'd be there calling on the phone, and people would come over to talk to me,
Uh,
and I'd have the phone to my ear and my other hand on the clicker, waiting for them to kind of ask me what they
oh, I
needed to
see.
ask, so I can go right back to the phone.
Wow.
So small efficiencies. I mean, that's a little overkill probably, but small efficiencies like that allows you to work at work and really do more for the time that you're there.
Got it. Understood. And who are your role models and people you kind of looked up to when you were coming up in the industry?
Uh, you know, Role model is a strong word. Mentors are a strong word. Um, I've been lucky enough to be around a lot of very successful people in the industry. A lot
Mm,
of the people that I started with, um, and I've taken away a lot from them, good and bad.
mm,
Really, a lot of the stuff I learned was what not to do. Right, seeing people do certain things and me crossing off the list, or being cognizant of not to do those
right.
things. So I don't have one that I could throw out there as far as a name. I've had many along the way, probably 2 dozen that I respect in this business. That I think they're doing great things, that have done it the right way, or have corrected and are now doing it the right way, or have done some things that I've taken a step back and say, ah, that's really
Mm,
innovative. There's a lot of people that work hard, that I admire. So it's been a collective process as far as me taking things from people in the industry that
mm,
I've known for a long time, both good and bad.
got it. And what drives you nowadays? Is it money, personal achievement, family, philanthropy? And when would you kind of say you succeeded and you can kind of retire?
I'd never say I succeed. I'm never happy.
Okay.
Even in over the last week, we closed over $100 million in deals in the last 9 days, and even then, it's not like I could sit back and have a few drinks. Hey,
Right.
I've succeeded and I could take some time
On to the
off.
next.
I'm always on to the next. I always want to continue to compete. Right now, I'm really taking pride in building out a team
Mm,
throughout the tri-state. Again, that's been something that I've always wanted to do. I haven't been in a position to do it. So that's really driving me right now. Seeing my senior brokers that have grown with me in my career, that I brought them on as analysts, and associates and even interns, and them really thriving and
Mm,
bringing people under them
right.
to help build out kind of counter silo to my silo. So really building a team and building an enterprise that I've always wanted to in commercial real estate.
Mm,
So that's really what's pushing me on a day-to-day basis. But I still like getting hired on deals.
sure.
The other night I picked up a physical listing agreement over in Long Island. I still like the chase. I still like the hunt. I still like succeeding, and I still like coming through and executing for my clients.
Got it. And Stephen, I have my final question to wrap this up.
Shoot.
What advice would you give your 22-year-old self about life, business, and relationships?
Wow. That's like a really introspective question to end up with. But um, I would say, you know, probably continue. I would probably give him some insight on some things I've learned later in
Mm,
life in my 30s and 40s as I matured. Couldn't say it'd be one thing, just probably a little insight on what to concentrate on.
right.
I would probably, tell myself, probably take that step a little bit sooner as far as to be able to control your entire destiny.
Mm,
I was on such a trajectory for a long time, just, building, hitting 100 property sales and 200, then 300, then 400. I was not that I had blinders on, but I was moving very, very quickly, at the speed of light. And if I would have probably took a step back, I probably would have made the move that I did two
mm,
years ago a little bit sooner
got it.
to control kind of more of the destiny.